Friends, this is a breaking broadcast with exclusive details about Putin's visit to Kazakhstan. There really is a lot to talk about, and things aren't as straightforward as, of course, Russian propaganda makes them out to be. Besides that, Latvia is preparing for war with the Russian Federation. But come on, with Latvia, there have been rumors for a long time that Putin wants to attack the Baltic states. And now Japan. In fact, they're seriously preparing to repel Russian aggression. Hello, friends. This is the Pritzli Project. My name's Vladimir Timoshenko. Let's get started. So, regarding the land of the rising sun and the Russian Federation, this is a very old story. And now, in 2026, when many people believe that World War III is already in full swing, just in some kind of hybrid phase, the latest news from Japan doesn't really come as a shock, but it does make you think. Has the Russian Federation really managed to mess things up for the whole world already? And is it true that the whole world will be stopping the Russians together? That's exactly what our next segment is about. And then we'll return to the studio for a conversation with Taras Zahorodniy. Let's go.
Japan is urgently moving troops because of fears that Putin might open a second front near Hokkaido. Why is Russia turning the Sea of Okhotsk into a submarine sanctuary? We'll explain everything right now. Japan is strengthening its defenses on the island of Hokkaido due to growing Russian military activity, according to the South China Morning Post. Japan's defense minister, Shigeru Koizumi, during a visit to military bases, stated the need for a flawless defense system in the north of the country.
Even though strengthening the defense of the southwestern regions is becoming more important, Hokkaido remains a critically important region. It is necessary to continue maintaining a flawless defense system here.
Japanese analysts note that Russia could open a second front near Hokkaido precisely when Japan is preoccupied with a crisis with China in the south. That's why the military is practicing rapid redeployment of units from the south to the north. Security researcher Yuko Izumi emphasized,
The movement of Russia's nuclear submarine fleet will remain a serious security concern for Japan.
Analysts emphasize that Russia is actively turning the Sea of Okhotsk in northern Hokkaido into a sanctuary for its nuclear submarines. Moscow has already deployed Su-35 fighter jets and anti-ship missiles on the territory that Tokyo refers to as the Northern Territories. This refers to 4 disputed islands off the northeastern coast of Hokkaido, which Russia administers as the Southern Kuril Islands. According to researcher Shingo Nagata, joint exercises by Chinese and Russian forces in Japanese airspace and waters have become routine. Just from April to December last year, Japan scrambled fighter jets 448 times, mostly to intercept Chinese and Russian aircraft. In March, the demonstration of Kinzhal hypersonic missiles on board Russian aircraft near Japan caused particular concern, according to media reports. Analysts note that Russia's provocations are both irritating and draining Japan's resources. At the same time, Japan's cabinet of ministers approved a record defense budget of $58 billion for this year, which is 9.4% higher than in 2025.
So, friends, there's really a lot to talk about. Joining us now is political technologist Taras Zahorodniy. Taras, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Great to see you.
Yes, hello.
Taras, my first question is for you. Let's start with Putin's visit to Kazakhstan. You know, everyone is already quoting the statement made by Kazakhstan's leader Tokayev. There were a lot of complimentary words directed at Putin. I'll even quote it. Not a single global problem can be solved without Russia. Vladimir Vladimirovich is an outstanding statesman, a politician of global stature, and so on. Everyone takes this, or rather, many people, let's put it that way, see this as, to put it mildly, strange behavior from Tokayev. Personally, I didn't expect anything different from him. That's just kind of Tokayev's signature style or something like that. At least that's how it seems to me. Actually, let's start with a basic question, Taras. Overall, what role does Kazakhstan play in the current geopolitical situation? And how important is it as a geopolitical player, let's say, as of 2026?
But Tokayev will always talk like that because Kazakhstan shares a border with Russia and there's a threat of invasion. Basically, he didn't say anything new. He said pretty much the same thing to Trump. You can take a moment to compare the two of them. It's just that there, he went out of his way to specifically point out that Trump, including for him, was divinely sent from heaven above. So he knows how to say the right thing there. He's a diplomat. He knows how to say the right thing. Well, of course, they're obviously uneasy. Russia's a completely crazy country right next door, and they have ties with them. As you might expect, they're implementing various safety precautions in different ways, through China and by working in cooperation with Turkey. But still, there's a massive, extensive border that's not controlled in any way, and that leads to significant security challenges. There is a substantial Russian minority in Kazakhstan that could be leveraged in a very similar fashion as we have seen in Ukraine. So it's no surprise that they're acting this way. Of course, the Russians are naturally trying to find a way somehow, and they are working on it to stop their influence from slipping away in Central Asia, especially in Kazakhstan. That's why Putin goes there, trying to show that they still have influence. They have joint projects there for exporting oil to China, including through Kazakhstan's territory. There are oil and gas projects, so they have things to discuss as well. But there was also an unpleasant incident there. Ukraine won a lawsuit against Gazprom for $1.5 billion in a Kazakh court. Or rather, it wasn't really a Kazakh court, but a special zone was set up where they brought in real British judges who actually ruled according to British law.
And this story about Ukraine winning that case is actually something we shouldn't forget. But you know, Taras, I often emphasize this on our broadcasts, and I completely agree with you on this point. In big politics, there are no friends. Ultimately, everything really depends on shared, let's say, interests at a given historical moment. As we bring our discussion on the topic of Kazakhstan to a close, there is a widely discussed theory suggesting that Nursultan Nazarbayev still hasn't had his final say in Kazakh politics. According to many different analytical agencies, he holds secret meetings with Putin, visits the Kremlin, and still continues to be received as an honored guest. Is it possible that Putin is somehow trying to rock the boat inside Kazakhstan and, in a way, bring Nazarbayev back to the presidential throne? Or is this all just conspiracy theory? And in principle, Putin feels he can work with Tokayev just fine.
Well, there might be an attempt, but first of all, Nazarbayev is already of advanced age. He stepped down because of his age, after all. That's one thing. Tokayev was his successor, but he probably thought Tokayev would just do whatever he said. But when Tokayev took power into his own hands, he put him in his place. And from his perspective, that makes sense. Is Putin trying to have some kind of conversations there about, well, he might try, but his influence over Nazarbayev is much less because when you have the state apparatus, you have the state apparatus. So to suggest definitively that this will have any particular negative consequences for Tokayev, I think Tokayev is monitoring such contacts closely and taking appropriate preventive measures.
I'd also like to talk with you about the latest news regarding President Zelensky. There are two important topics. The first one is that, as we speak right now, let me remind you, we're live on air. At this moment, Zelensky is in Sweden. And as far as I understand, the issue of Gripen fighter jets is being discussed. It seems to me that this is a very important moment. While Putin is busy taking care of his own affairs in Kazakhstan, let him enjoy being called nice names. With respectful, let's say, honorable words, Ukraine is negotiating about the fighter jets. How important are these kinds of contacts, meetings, negotiations, and so on at this stage of the war? And then we'll move on to the topic of Volodymyr Zelensky's letter to Donald Trump.
Well, it's logical. It's Sweden. Sweden has a very good defense industry. They're just as scared as the other Baltic countries. They basically share a border with Russia. As far as I know, the first planes, 16 of them, will be delivered there this year. That's definitely a big plus for us. It's an incredibly significant and vital signal for us because we are in desperate need of essential resources. And, there is absolutely nothing that unites people quite like mutual dependence and shared fear. That common fear that we all share is the threat from Russia. Russia is constantly making claims to seize the island of Gotland. And accordingly, that helps to generate the essential and vital financial resources to support the project, a foundation for cooperating with them. So that's how it is. That's how I see it. Well, see what happens next. Well, there's plenty of room for cooperation there, too. They have electronics and a lot of interesting things, different types of weaponry. So there could be synergy in many areas.
Zelensky's letter to church. This is the news that came in yesterday. Zelensky noted that not long ago, the Russian Federation launched 2 Oresniks at Ukraine, not just one. The main point is that Ukraine is saying there are problems. And we have a shortage of air defense systems. In general, how do you assess the very fact of Zelensky's letter to Trump? What does this mean? It means that cooperation between Ukraine and the US continues, and that despite Russian propaganda claims, everything is fine. Business and working relations are being maintained. That's basically, as I see it, what we need.
Have they always been like this? So we do have allies in the US, no matter what is being said over there. I'm surprised when many people think and actually say with a straight face that the US is an ally of Russia. I have a simple question. Are they selling weapons? No. Who is Elon Musk cooperating with? Ukraine or Russia, right? And Palantir, that company, who are they cooperating with? Ukraine and so on. So there may be difficulties, there may be misunderstandings, but overall, there is a strategy in place. The letter is not just to Trump, but also to the congressman. This is a unique way to remind them about us and, in fact, unite all the camps in the US around the topic of Ukraine. I think this is the right move on the president's part to remind him about this. This serves as a vital form of strategic communication, including a necessary reminder directed not just to the leaders of the European Union, but specifically to the citizens and voters across the United States. It shows that you continue to support Ukraine and its people. It is a good and proper step that helps to revive and strengthen many critical things, reminding everyone around the world that Ukraine is certainly not losing this war. I think that even the most diehard Russophiles in the US now understand the reality that Ukraine is not losing this war and is making a strong case for winning it, especially after Ukraine has effectively taken control of the south of our temporarily occupied country. That's Donetsk region, Zaporizhia region, Kherson region. I've already seen videos where they're moving fast, even on the roads of Luhansk region. There, the Z supporters are whining as some strange is going on. Drones are flying, taking out all the logistics. That is, Ukraine strikes on Russian territory, which are being carried out by special services. For example, the SBU just hit Tuapse again, to finish everything off there for good. Strikes on oil refineries. This is actually a great foundation for future cooperation with the US.
I've been wanting to ask you for a long time. Glad that on the UNIN YouTube channel we have this chance. By the way, friends, subscribe to UNIN and Taras Zahorodny's YouTube channel. You'll find great info and content there. I'm telling you this sincerely. Look, I've been wanting to ask for a while. We're used to the idea that there are basically 2 poles in the world right now, as people like to say. On one side, there are the United States, with all their pros, cons, and so on. They're the United States. On the other pole, there's China, another, let's say, global hegemon. So which one of them, sorry for the blunt question, is stronger and cooler right now? Who can claim the title of #1 in the world as of 2026? Do you have a clear answer to that question? Or is it yes? Who?
Yeah, I have a clear answer. For now, it's the US. For now, it's the US. Because in this world, power is what matters. Power is what ultimately determines how things unfold. Look, it's the power of the Pentagon's size, the ability to control key strategic points around the world that truly makes all the difference. Check out the Pentagon's budget. Look at China's defense budget, their capabilities, whether their military is well developed, and their ability to carry out large scale operations. Right now, the US is ramping up the Pentagon, but the US already has a problem. The major challenge the US faces right now is that they've basically relinquished control of their industry to China. And China is actively and rapidly expanding and scaling up a lot of things. And now, if things continue to proceed at this current pace, for example, in global shipbuilding, it is no longer a certainty that the United States will be able to effectively maintain its strategic control over the Pacific. Well, look at what the war between Russia and Ukraine has shown. Turns out, for example, that you don't need to build aircraft carriers that cost $3 to $4 billion each. Although, let me remind you, China's now finishing its fourth aircraft carrier, while the US has 10. For example, you could mass produce about 500 dual purpose bulk carriers. And these ships could approach an aircraft carrier group. Then suddenly the deck opens and outfly, well, however many Shaheds you'd need to destroy an aircraft carrier group. 1,000? 1,000. You'd need 10,000. You'd need 10,000. You'd need 100,000. The Chinese could mass produce them. There you go. And that's why, at this stage, the US is still stronger. Of course, they're stronger. That's not even up for debate. No matter how much people spin these fantastic tales about the great and mighty China, that is just one part of the equation. When you look at the big picture, ultimate power is the only thing that truly matters in global politics. Consequently, the United States is also very actively working to build up the military and economic strength of China's long-standing, age-old regional rivals, most notably Japan, and a lot of other things too. So, of course, the US is stronger right now, no question about it. Yes, they're falling behind in some areas, partly because they let things slip. And for 8 years, basically no one in the US was really paying attention to China. Now the situation's completely different.
Yes, I want to mention, since you brought up Japan, there's already information today that the Japanese are quietly, gradually starting to prepare for a possible invasion from the Russian Federation. There are issues with the islands, as they say, and the Russians also have territorial claims. By the way, what do you think, are the Japanese right to prepare for war if they want peace? Right now, well, when you're in Kyiv, waiting for the next round of shelling and so on, it all seems pretty unrealistic. But who knows? Could we have imagined 20 years ago that there would be a war in Ukraine? I think hardly anyone could have. Well,
Why do you think it's unrealistic? Why do you think it's realistic? Well, for example, Japan might go to war over Taiwan. If China attacks Taiwan, they'll defend it because it's also a matter of existential survival for them. Because if Taiwan falls, China could declare a blockade of Japan at any moment. And that's it. The country would basically be shut off. That's why they'll be preparing, including with Russia, since it's an ally of China. Well, there are also issues related to what the Japanese call the Northern Territories, meaning the Kuril Islands, which were seized by the Soviet Union. And it is also worth noting that there is actually still no official peace treaty between Japan and Russia.
up to this day, that's also very telling. And, before we wrap up, there's one more thing I'd like to clarify with you. Now, in 2026, since we've already started talking about China and the United States, their relationship, let's say, this struggle for the role of global hegemon, to put it a bit grandly, is this really a process that only exists in our conversations, in discussions among analysts, journalists, and so on? Or, in principle, do the Chinese, just like the Americans, actually want to pull ahead in this race? Basically, do these countries set a goal for themselves to be number one?
Of course they do. But in this world, everything is determined by power, first and foremost. When looking at it from this perspective, the United States is the dominant force in the world.
So, what do you think, Taurus? I'm really interested in this topic. Basically, let's see 5 years go by. Not so much a prediction, but an analysis. Will China be able to catch up with the United States? who's the favorite, so to speak, by the end? So now it's 2026. By 2030, will anything change? Let me put the question to you that way. In the end,
I believe there will be a war between China and the US.
with China,
Of course, it all comes down to China's own crisis of overproduction.
it's a crisis.
Of overproduction, yes.
Where do we fit in here?
Will we be? We'll be in the right scenario. We're already prepared for this. We have to be a military monster, and then we will be ourselves. Everything is determined by strength. Who says Ukraine won't be calling the shots on many issues? If you have strength, if you have leverage, you start making progress economically. And look, Trump showed you how the world really works. And all that ridiculous nonsense about trade agreements. Simply create a much better product, successfully break into the market, and so on. He showed you exactly how it all works. If you're dependent on us, like the Europeans are, then we put pressure on you. You buy from us, you're scared of Russia, so to protect yourself, you buy a lot of weapons from us, right? And you agree, for example, to buy a lot of energy from us, and you also open up your market. That's how the economy works. That's how the real world works. And that's exactly how we should use it too. When we sell weapons somewhere, for example, we also bundle in products from our own companies, like in Africa or other countries. Why us? Because we're significantly more powerful, because we've rightfully earned our place, because that's exactly how predators survive and thrive in the wild, and that is how prosperous economies are constructed and sustained.
So we've come to the conclusion that maybe in 5 years, a war with the United States and China will break out. But in any case, things will turn out well for Ukraine. Well, that's good to hear. Taras, thank you so much for this conversation. As always, it was great to see you. And until next time, well, friends, this was the Project in the Crosshairs, our latest episode. We'll definitely see each other again today during the live broadcast on the UNA and YouTube channel. Subscribe, hit the like button, and leave your comments. This is really, really important to us. This was Volodymyr Tymoshenko with you. Everything